Gimmick or innovation? That is the question I wanted to answer about the new trick-taking game, Time Chase, a trick-taking game with a twist. What conclusion did I come to? Well, let's take a look at how Time Chase plays and find out. Hi, I'm Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise, and thank you for joining me for my initial thoughts on Time Chase, a new trick-taking game by Renegade Game Studios. In this game, you are allowed to travel back in time to previous tricks that have been taken, known as events, and change the winner of those tricks in future subsequent turns. And the first player to successfully manipulate the time stream in such a way that they control 3 of these events wins the game. Here's a brief overview to give you an idea of how the game works. First of all, each player is dealt 10 cards, and then the first round begins, signified by the round 1 token being placed next to where the trick will be played. Now, each round will have its own round indicator with the cards that lead and took the trick remaining on the table after the trick has been scored. This is necessary because in subsequent rounds, players can actually spend crystals that they will accumulate over the course of the game to move their little meeple token backwards in time to tricks from the previous rounds and actually replay those, possibly retroactively winning those tricks. Each trick on the table, past and present, is marked with a token belonging to the player that currently is the winner of that trick. And the first player to be the one who is winning 3 of the tricks on the table wins the entire game. So, did that sound confusing? Because it is a little bit. But, spoiler alert, I like this game a whole lot. Come here, game. Renegade Game Studios has had a track record of developing really good little card games, and this is another one of them that I think fits that bill. It, for me, is right up there with Blood of an Englishman and Fox in the Forest, which consequently were both 2-player only games, while this one actually plays up to 6. So this is decidedly not a simple little trick-taking game. There is a little bit of complexity to this, which I'll get back to in a minute. But I don't think that its complexity is something that would be a barrier to having it hit the table. It's more an obstacle to mastering the game. Let me explain. One of the more complex trick-taking games in my collection is a game called Tournament at Camelot, where you play different characters and you have hit points and you have special little decks that are with cards that are unique to you, and there's actually battles going on and you have to track damage that you're taking. It's a fantastic trick-taking game, but the level of complexity in remembering how all of these rules work together and how all of this functions is something that prevents it from hitting the table with any sort of frequency at all, which is just a shame because it's a great game, but it's also a game that lends itself to having a lot of overhead to get through when teaching new players. And Time Chase, while it still has a certain level of complexity to it, is a different type of complexity. This game can be taught in like 5 to 10 minutes, unlike Tournament at Camelot, which takes a little bit longer. But this game's complexity comes not from learning the rules, but from mastering the rules. For example, throughout the course of the game, players will be earning and spending little crystals that allow them to travel backwards in time to previous tricks that were played earlier in the game. Now, accumulating and spending these crystals didn't really bog down the gameplay, but it was one more thing to remember. Oh, I played this card, and while it didn't allow me to take control of the trick, that does mean I get a crystal. So I got to check, I didn't get that, okay, yeah, I get a crystal, okay. And so on and so forth. It's also critical to the gameplay that as tricks are played, the card that led and the card that actually won the trick remain on the table after the trick is completed in a very specific orientation. And remembering, okay, this is the card that led, this is the card that actually took it, so this is what you're leading with, this is actually what you have to beat when you play it, are 2 really important things to remember, but they're also not the only things to remember, because there is also another card called the invariant, which is basically trump, which you also have to reference when you're going and taking tricks as well. So you got 3 cards to remember every time you go back in time to try and take control of that trick. Again, it's not necessarily a complex mechanism, it's just one that requires a little bit of reference and bookkeeping to really keep up on as you're playing subsequent tricks. But once players start to gain that muscle memory and master the approach of going back in time to play those subsequent tricks, well, the game really starts to shine. One of the things I really like about this game is how players have a meeple which represents which trick they're actually playing at. So if I travel back in time, I might have 3 people actually playing this trick, 2 playing this other one, and just 1 playing this trick from several rounds ago. And that means that a different number of cards are going to be in play for each trick. In fact, if I'm the only player who is at a trick, whether the present one or one from a previous round, I'm the only person who's going to play a card to either take or retake that trick. So I kind of have the luxury of playing any card that I want and knowing what the outcome is going to be. Now, with all of this back and forth throughout the time lengths being built out on the table, you might get concerned that the game could drag on, but the game has its own built-in countdown timer. It's either going to end when someone gains control of 3 different tricks that have been played on the table, or after 10 rounds, at which time whoever has the most tricks wins. So yes, while not necessarily complex, the game can seem complicated until you get used to the routine and you build that muscle memory. While the game went over pretty well with the people that I've introduced it to, I could see other groups having a little bit of trepidation about it, especially about the kind of unorthodox way that the previous tricks stay on the table and can go and be manipulated as future turns go on. One complaint that my entire game group did have about the game was that it really could have used like little player screens to hide your little crystals behind, because during the course of the game you're going to secretly kind of bid on how many crystals you're going to spend to go backwards in time. So everyone had to, holding their cards in hand, go and shield their gems and then kind of move some out of the way onto this little card that they wanted to do and then reveal it all. It might have been a little more convenient to have like a little screen that you could put some gems behind and then go, haha, here's what I'm spending to go backwards in time, isn't that cool? Instead of having to juggle your cards in the screen and move everything kind of secretly all at once. But I guess you could also just solve that problem by scooping up the gems in your hand and simultaneously revealing how many you wanted to spend, so solves that problem. There is something about the game that I do have a concern about. You're dealt 10 cards, and that's the entire hand of cards that you will have to work with throughout the entire game, because the game is going to be at most 10 rounds. But what if you get dealt a really bad hand, and you're stuck with it? You know, you can't swap out cards or trade them or exchange with other players or get new ones out of the deck or anything. Those are the cards that you have when you play the game. So if I'm just dealt a hand of cards that's a bum rap, am I just out of luck? Now, of course, one thing you can do is you can travel back in time to subsequent previous tricks and maybe use those cards to your advantage to win those older ones. So maybe the cards that you have in your hand are garbage for this present trick, but they might actually become useful as the invariant or trump changes for previous tricks. I haven't played the game enough to know whether or not you really can get painted into a corner with a really bad hand. But like I said, out of everything about this game, that's the one thing that I'm worried could leave a soured impression with somebody. Overall though, I went into Gen Con hoping beyond hope that this was going to be an innovative card game that lived up to my expectations, and it did not disappoint. I found Time Chase to be an innovative trick-taking game that, while not as complex as some other trick-taking games on my shelves, such as Tournament at Camelot, still requires a bit of a learning curve. But really, if trick-taking games with a twist are what you usually enjoy, well, by all means, go give this game a try.
Get ready to rock with this metal-inspired design of the Pair of Dice Paradise logo. Wear it around as you drive your 87 Trans Am to the next Dokken concert. This thing is guaranteed to melt your face off. Metaphorically.